Welcome back to the channel. Today we'd like to take some time and discuss the repairing of damaged perforated leather and vinyl. Now, if you're anything like me, you might be a bit reluctant to repair perforated materials, and with good reason. And this is what I explain to my retail customers. When you get a piece of paper in the mail that's designed to have a tab torn off of it, the paper is perforated, right? So that you can tear it easily and cleanly. So now you buy perforated leather, and if you don't take extra special good care of it, it will tear easily and cleanly. Then if I were to repair that tear and put the perforations in it, what would you expect from the repair? So you could say then that perforated materials have a built-in failure factor. It's physics. We didn't invent it. We didn't create it to begin with. It's just physics. It's got a built-in failure factor. So that might be why we're a little bit reluctant on repairing this kind of materials. And for that reason, I'm never hesitant about suggesting that the damaged parts be inserted at an upholstery shop with new material. And the other thing that guides whether we repair or not is this thing that's been guiding me for 40 years with my customers. I always put the customer first, and I always do what's best for the automobile. For example, is it a late model car? Is it an older vehicle? Right? What's the mileage on there? And for the customer, is the customer just trying to get this car ready for resale? Or is the customer going to actually keep this car for 5 or 10 years? And then there's what's the expected outcome of the repairs? Is it such that we think we can disguise the repair well enough? So there's a lot of factors, and it might even leave me out of the picture. But that's okay, because for the customer, that kind of honesty goes a long way. And even if they don't use you on this job, the next time they have a problem, you know who they're going to call. That being said, we still get situations where repairing is going to be the option. And in the field we see a large gamut of repairs, and we're going to be discussing all of these kinds inclusively here, I hope, in our discussion. We have small repairs which require very little work. We have rather large complicated repairs which we feel that we can hide successfully enough to get by on this particular job. And then we're forced, sometimes not forced, but kind of coerced into fixing damages that we shouldn't be doing. The dealership may have an older car that's on the back line, and he says, "Can you do something?" And we'll do something. We're not proud of those kinds of repairs, yet we still have to do something, right? And we'll discuss that too. So I think it's only fitting that we get started, though, with the simpler repairs and establish some basic principles. So let's get to work. So we're looking at a couple of aircraft seats that have gotten damaged by the extra seat covers that were applied over top of them. We see the chafed finish right here, and we see some dye transfer of sorts here where the perforated part is. No one was able to take care of this dark line with any other chemicals, and me neither, until I got to using acetone, then realizing acetone is the product to use. Of course, that can be dangerous because it will distort the factory finish here, but it's imperative that we get this stain out, because if we have dye transfer, then that dye can also transfer to the top of our new coating. In order to keep the damage more localized, I'm going to use a pointed Q-tip of sorts here. and just try to affect only that dark line if possible. So in doing this, the acetone is dissolving the factory water-based coating here a little bit, and it's really generating its own type of coating. It's like we now have a solvent coating that's got redistributed, and so it's clogging up the perforations. And I've put a first coat of color on that. So I'm taking a metal probe at this point and just redefining the holes. This will take a little time to do, but while this is going on, I did want to mention this particular effect of melting the factory coating with acetone and redistributing it, because this is the answer we came up with on the Ford Expeditions and Explorers, and I believe the Ford Fusions as well, when they had the severely cracked inserts in the rear seats. There was nothing that would pull that finish loose. It was very tenacious, and the only other answer was to fill those deep cracks with a lot of filler, and that didn't seem like a very good answer. And so I'd always get questions about that, what to do for that. And so I spent about 3 hours one day coming up with the acetone and 220 grit sandpaper to reconstitute the factory finish and make a slurry and actually fill in those cracks. All the work that was left to do is let that dry, sand that with 400 to make it smooth, and recolor. Done. So we took a dreadful job and make it one we look forward to doing and making some money. And the question would be, well, how did that last? Is that very strong? Well, I did a retail job the same way, and I got a call a year later to do the front seats, and the rear seats were just as nice as the day that I repaired them. So yes, this is a way of reconstituting that really, really works. It's like when they dig up the road bed, the asphalt roads, and they add some new asphalt to it and reconstitute it, and so they're laying the same road back down as they dug up. So that's a reason for confidence then, that if you do have to do this and use acetone and reconstitute this finish, it's going to be strong. There's no need to worry about the integrity of the finish. It's as if you made a new solvent coating out of it and laid it back down. So that's not necessarily pertinent to the perforated leather, but since we had the occasion, I thought it would be good to review that little gem. So I went on to tidy up all the rest of the holes in that panel. When customers ask, how much do you charge? I say, I charge by the hole. How big is it? Now we want to turn our attention to the little bit of damage in this perforated leather. It's not much damage, and so we're going to choose here to use a flexible superglue gel. And I'm going to transport that in place using the probe so I can get it localized just where I want it. We're not going to accelerate it. We're going to let it go down in the crack a little bit, add some more, and we can sand across it to add some filler to it by means of our sanding dust. And just repeat this a few times until it looks like we've got a nice smooth connection here. We are going to talk a little bit more about this choice of the flexible superglue gel, because normally we're a little skittish about using any kind of a superglue on leather. There is a place for it though. Every upholstery shop I have ever been in uses a superglue of some sort in a leather seat at some point in time. In this instance, you can see that the flexible glue takes on more of a cosmetic role rather than a structural one. The structure is important here, but basically the leather is held together pretty well by itself. So I think we're looking pretty good here. Once we finish our color coat, we can go along with our probe and just redefine these holes. And then we're ready for a clear coat or finish color coat, or that could be it. Leave it alone. I mean, whichever you decide at that point, that's it. So I was happy with those results, and so was the broker and the customer. Having reviewed that, now we know what we're looking at when we see a seat like this. Somehow, this retail customer softened the finish on his seat. Maybe it was wet for an extended period of time. But you can see that the original coating on this seat, and this is the driver's seat here, where the original coating actually filled in the perforations. So we did as we did in our previous example. We just went through and poked the holes, but we fortified the surface by putting a color coat and a clear coat on here, both of which had cross-linker to make them strong and hold up. And so hopefully we won't have that problem again. And now we're on to a late model Porsche with very much the same kind of damage. We are also here going to use a bit of the flexible super glue gel, like we did in our last repair. Now, why would this be appropriate? Because a flexible super glue gel, we might think, really isn't that flexible, is it? No, not too much. Especially if we could imagine putting a big glob, right, or covering a large area. We wouldn't expect it to be that flexible. But if it's called flex gel, then the name implies that there must be some relative flexibility about it, right? So I think it boils down to how the technician applies it. First of all, let's consider our choice of the flex gel. We don't use a very thin super glue because the leather fibers will act like a wick, and just a little bit of the thin glue will result in a big hard spot, say the size of a dime or even a quarter. But the flexible gel just surrounds the immediate leather fibers that it touches. Also, we're only applying individual drops in a certain small area, so we're not concerned about flexibility there. Think of a bead necklace. It would be considered flexible, but the individual beads are not. Also, we could think about applying a very thin layer. It would seem reasonable that a thin layer would be more flexible than a thick layer. And here's a tip: always use fresh product. Old product will fail every time. And I don't sell products, so you know it has to be true. Another suggestion is to not use accelerator on the glue until all the layers are completely finished. That way it doesn't seem to affect the flexibility that much, but it does seem to make a stronger bond. In this seat, we're looking at a burn hole in which some of the foam is actually missing. So I'm putting a little bit of the glue into a piece of paper towel, and then this is going to be inserted into the hole. So it will be a good filler. It will glue into the bottom and the sides just a little bit. It won't be pushing back up like foam does. And so this will cement the base of our repair nicely. Now I'm going to be using the glue and sanding method again on this repair, even though this repair is a little larger. We're not going to be sacrificing too much adhesion because we're in such a small area. But the main reason is we're missing several holes. And I want to be able to drill those holes exactly and cleanly. So a soft filler would not allow me to drill those perfect holes. We need some rigidity in our repair in order to accomplish that. So that's why the flexible glue is a good choice in this instance. So other than the step of drilling new holes, this repair is the same as the others. Now sometimes I get the argument, this repair has to hold the weight of a person though. But let's look at some simple physics to see why that is not true. A typical perforated insert could measure 12 by 18 inches, giving us a total of 216 square inches. And that accommodates a person's buttocks and their thighs. So that's all their weight on those 216 square inches. So to make it simple, if a person weighed 216 pounds, then he's distributing 1 pound per square inch of that seat. In that square inch, there are typically 41 holes. And counting the leather between the holes, each one individually as a bridge, you're going to find 80 leather bridges in that square inch. So each leather bridge would then be asked to carry 1/80th of a pound. In reality, though, we would expect that seat to hold somebody twice that weight. But then we throw in the argument that it's the foam that supports the weight, and the leather is just a covering over the foam, and the foam distributes the weight to the frame of the seat. So there's very little stress really on the leather itself. And we're reminded that these damages never came from the weight of a person. They came from an impact of a sharp object that had some weight and some force. For example, we could picture all the weight of a television falling from a distance of 1 foot onto just 1 square inch of the leather, not spread out over the 216 square inches. So in our case of the 216-pound person, each square inch only needs to support 1 pound. Or it might require more strength than that if the person sits down from a distance, because there's extra force involved. But at any rate, each square inch of the seat shares the load. For example, we wouldn't expect 1 stitch to hold a garment together. It would break immediately. But 1,000 stitches do nicely together. So I think it's helpful to just take a moment and think about the physics of the matter. We don't expect our repair to hold the full weight of a person. It just has to do its little job. Now, in our repair at hand, if we wanted to put a little filler in one of the holes, we could do that. We could use our probe to resize the hole and then let the filler dry, or use the hair dryer to speed up the drying of that. And then we're putting our finished color on there. So I hope you enjoyed this introduction to perforated leather. Next time we'll tackle a more serious repair.